this video here may actually save you hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours of language learning, because I think that a lot of people on YouTube have been pushing this idea that, language learning is all about putting in the time. It's all about just, putting in the time. You have to spend hundreds of hours listening and reading to, whatever language it is that you're learning. And they're saying that this is the only thing that matters. And as a matter of fact, I think this is only one of the three things that really matter when learning a language. And I want to talk about what these three things are and why you may be missing out and wasting a lot of time just, by grinding and spending a lot of time in the language. So in case you don't know me very, very quickly, my name is Loïs. I've learned multiple languages, well, English being one of them. I'm a French speaker. I've learned Japanese as well. I've learned Spanish. And also, I've interviewed more than a dozen researchers in this field of second language acquisition, some of them really big names in this field, and essentially asking them always the same questions of how can you learn languages better? How can you learn languages, more efficiently? And so I think that my opinions are greatly inspired by these people. So the three things that really matter when learning a language, and I'm not just inventing this, I'm taking this from Professor Paul Nation, who's one of the most, widely recognized researchers in the field of second language acquisition and specifically vocabulary learning. When it comes down to it, there are only three things that matter when learning a language, and one of them is time, obviously, but this is not the only thing. The second thing is going to be, what do you focus on? Meaning that, are you focusing on high frequency items? Are you focusing on, items that are specifically going to be high frequency in your case? I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And the third thing is going to be, what is your quality of attention like? Meaning there are two aspects here. When you're studying, what kind of focus do you bring into your study? I'm going to talk about that. And secondly, what is the sort of depth of mental processing that you're bringing to, the items that you're studying? I'm going to talk about that as well. I think I don't need to talk about, the time aspect. Everyone, I think, pretty much understands the point at this point, which is that, you need to put in the hours, you need to put in the time, you need to, put in the reps and so on. So let me talk about first what you focus on. This is the second aspect that I think is important. And by the way, these aspects are not, ranked in any specific kind of order, but what you focus on has two components. Number one, what I've learned from, doing interviews with a lot of scientists is that number one, you really need to be focusing on high frequency vocabulary. When you're learning a language, for the most part, there are three aspects that you can focus on: pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. Pronunciation can be challenging, but this is something that is limited in scope. Grammar, the same. Now, the scope is much larger than pronunciation, but nevertheless, in about 2 years of high school or about 1 year of college courses, you can cover, most of what you need in terms of grammar in the specific language. Vocabulary, on the other hand, is very different because there are thousands of words that you need to know in order to learn a language. And specifically, if you want to study and really improve your efficiency, really be efficient at learning a language, really have a high return on your time when learning a language, you need to focus on high frequency vocabulary. And also, when you're done with that, medium frequency vocabulary. So what I mean specifically is that there are a lot of, there are items, let's say about the 3,000 most common word families in a language that no matter what, no matter who you are, no matter what your use of the language is going to be, you're going to need to learn them. And this is, high return, high yield sort of items that you really need to learn. And so as you can see, you can spend a lot of time, you can really grind in the language, but if you're, encountering just a bunch of low frequency items, it doesn't actually bring you much. At some point, you're going to need to know them, but at the start, when you're really trying to get get some momentum, it's much more important to focus on the high frequency stuff and then the medium frequency stuff. So this is one thing. The second aspect when talking about, what you should focus on is that actually, every person has a different goal when speaking a language, when learning a language. So if your goal is to have conversations with certain people in a work setting, for example, then the high frequency vocabulary for you is going to be different from, someone else, for someone whose goal is to go in the country and go to college, for example. So there are certain very sort of targeted situations where you have to think by yourself of, okay, what is the high frequency vocabulary for me in these particular scenarios that I'm likely to be in. All right, now the third aspect that is important for language learning is the quality of attention, and there are two aspects here. I'm going to talk about the first one, which is depth of mental processing. Now, this is really important. So think about this, right? When you're learning a language, there are multiple ways of really going about it. And again, I'm talking specifically about vocabulary here, but this also applies to other aspects of language learning. So when you're learning, let's say, a sentence, right? There's a sentence that you want to learn in the language. What you can do is, okay, you have a book, you read the sentence, there's a word that you don't understand, you pick up a dictionary or Google Translate, AI, whatever, you look up the word because you didn't know the meaning, and you see the meaning of the word on the website, and you think to yourself, oh, okay, that's what it means. Good. This is recognition, right? This is a very shallow depth of mental processing, not meaning that this is bad, but you need to keep in mind that it is shallow. A deeper level of mental processing would be, okay, I'm reading the sentence and then I try to recall, okay, what does that mean? Now, obviously you cannot recall something that you haven't learned, but just for the sake of this example, just read it, you recall it, and you're trying to, recall the meaning of that sentence. And so this is a deeper level of mental processing. This requires more work in your mind. And so you're much more likely to have that sentence and that word stick in your mind for longer. An even deeper level of mental processing would be, okay, I don't have the sentence in the target language, I have it in English. And now I'm trying to say, okay, how do I actually say this in the target language? This is an even deeper level of mental processing. This is called productive recall. You're trying to produce the language. And so the deeper you go, the more likely you are to remember items, because always remember that when you're learning a language, it's really a challenge of you need to remember a lot of things in the long term without forgetting them. You don't want to fill the bucket and you're just a leaking bucket at the end of the day. You want to retain everything or most of the stuff that you have. And so an even deeper a level of mental processing would be something like using mnemonics, like the keyword technique. I'm not going to talk about that in detail, but you can see that there are varying levels of, like depth of mental processing. Now, you do not need to use the deepest level of mental processing every time. This is not necessary, but just keep in mind that there are times when it is actually good to use specifically, productive recall or these kinds of things. And finally, the last aspect when it comes to quality of attention is the actual quality of your attention. When you're studying with flashcards or when you're reading a text in a foreign language, what is your attention like? Is it wavering? Is it going back and forth between the text or your flashcard and the TV? Or are you 100% focused on the text, on the form, on every single sort of syllable? There is a group of people, I'm thinking specifically of, people like Buddhist monks who have developed entire systems where the goal is to train the quality and the stability of your attention to really be focused on one thing and sort of, have a high quality of attention. My guess is that if you have a high quality of attention, it's going to have a huge impact on how efficient you are at learning the language. You don't have, an attention that is scattered all over the place. You can really focus on what you're doing, because if half of the time you're thinking about, something else, you get distracted, then, your studying time is effectively cut in half. If you want to learn more about, efficient language learning techniques, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave a comment below if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.